Homeless teen helped flight attendant carry supplies across the runway. An hour later, 20 pilots. Marcus had been sleeping in Terminal 3 for 6 days straight, and he was getting good at being invisible. At 17, he'd learned that airports were surprisingly safe places to spend the night if you knew how to blend in. Sit near charging stations with a backpack, pretend to read something on your phone, and move every few hours so security wouldn't notice the pattern. The key was looking like you belonged somewhere, even when you belonged nowhere at all. He'd been on his own for 3 months now, ever since aging out of his last foster placement with nowhere to go. The group home had given him a garbage bag full of clothes and exactly $73. That money was long gone, spent on bus fare trying to reach an uncle in Denver who turned out not to exist at the address he'd memorized from a Christmas card years ago. Now he was stuck at Denver International Airport, too proud to call social services and too scared to try the streets. The airport wasn't terrible, honestly. There were bathrooms where he could wash up, water fountains, and enough food court scraps after closing time to keep him from starving. He'd figured out which restaurants threw away perfectly good sandwiches and which security guards would look the other way if he was quiet about it. But winter was coming, and he knew this arrangement wouldn't last forever. Marcus was picking at a half-eaten pretzel he'd found when he noticed the commotion near gate B-15. A flight attendant, maybe mid-40s, with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a neat bun, was struggling with an enormous cart loaded with supplies. The cart had hit a bump and tipped sideways, sending boxes of blankets, pillows, and what looked like medical supplies scattered across the floor. If you're enjoying this story so far, consider subscribing for more gripping, real-life-inspired tales. "Oh, for crying out loud," the woman muttered, crouching down to gather the scattered items. Her name tag read, Sarah. Other passengers walked around her, some glancing with mild sympathy, but most too focused on catching their connections to stop and help. Airport staff hurried past, busy with their own urgent tasks. Marcus watched for a moment, that familiar tug in his chest that he'd felt since childhood, the inability to walk past someone who needed help, even when he barely had anything to give. His foster mom, Janet, used to say it would get him in trouble someday. That kindness was a luxury he couldn't afford, but sitting there watching this woman struggle alone, surrounded by hundreds of people who were too busy to care, he couldn't just do nothing. He approached slowly, his worn sneakers squeaking slightly on the polished floor. "Excuse me, Mom, do you need some help with that?" Sarah looked up, surprised. She took in Marcus's appearance, the oversized donated jacket, the backpack that contained everything he owned, the careful way he held himself that suggested he was used to being told to move along. But her expression softened when she met his eyes. "That's very sweet of you, honey, but I've got it handled," she said, though clearly she didn't. The cart was heavy and unwieldy, and she was already breathing hard from the effort. "It's no trouble, really," Marcus insisted, already bending down to help gather the scattered blankets. "Where does this need to go?" Sarah hesitated for a moment, then smiled. "Well, if you're sure you don't mind, these supplies need to get to the maintenance hangar across the runway. There's been an emergency landing, and we're setting up a temporary shelter for passengers who might be stuck overnight." Marcus had no idea what an emergency landing meant, or why passengers would need shelter, but he could see that Sarah was stressed and running out of time. "I can carry whatever you need," he offered. Together, they reloaded the cart and began the long walk through the airport's back corridors, past areas Marcus had never seen before. Sarah badged them through several security doors, leading him into the operational side of the airport, where everything was concrete and fluorescent lighting and the constant hum of machinery. "You don't work here, do you?" Sarah asked as they walked, glancing at his clothes again. "No, ma'am, just waiting for my connection." Marcus lied smoothly, the same story he'd been telling security guards all week. "Where are you headed?" The question hung in the air, and Marcus realized he didn't have a good answer. Where was he headed? He'd been surviving day to day for so long that he'd stopped thinking about destinations. "Still figuring that out," he said finally, which was at least honest. Sarah looked at him more carefully then, and Marcus worried she was seeing too much. But instead of pressing him for details, she just nodded. "Sometimes the best journeys are the ones without a clear destination," she said quietly. They reached the hangar after a 10-minute walk that took them outside onto the tarmac. Marcus had never been this close to the massive airplanes, their engines silent, but somehow still imposing in the late afternoon light. The hangar was a cavernous space filled with equipment and aircraft parts, but one section had been cleared and was being set up with rows of cots and folding chairs. "Flight 447 from Chicago had engine trouble," Sarah explained, as they unloaded the supplies. "Nothing dangerous, but they had to make an emergency landing, and now passengers are stranded until morning. Company policy is to provide overnight accommodations, but the hotels are all booked because of some conference in town." As Marcus helped arrange blankets and pillows on the cots, he found himself thinking about the passengers who would sleep here tonight. People with places to go and people waiting for them, who were probably frustrated and worried, but who had lives to return to once this was over. What would that feel like, he wondered, to have your biggest worry be a delayed flight instead of where you'd sleep or when you'd eat next? "Marcus," Sarah said. He'd told her his name while they worked. "I know this might be presumptuous, but are you okay? Really okay? Because if you need help with anything—" The kindness in her voice almost broke something inside him. For a moment, he wanted to tell her everything, about the foster homes, about aging out of the system, about the 3 months of sleeping in bus stations and airports and trying to figure out how to become an adult when no one had ever taught him how. But the words stuck in his throat, held back by years of learning that adults who promised to help usually disappeared as soon as things got complicated. "I'm okay," he said instead. "Just between places right now." Sarah studied his face for a long moment, and Marcus could see her making some kind of decision. "Well," she said finally, "I need to get back and help with the passengers. But Marcus, thank you, really. You didn't have to help, and it meant a lot that you did." She pressed something into his hand, a $20 bill. "For your connection," she said with a meaningful look that suggested she understood more than she was letting on. Marcus wanted to refuse the money, but his empty stomach won out over his pride. "Thank you," he said quietly. As they walked back toward the main terminal, neither of them noticed the small group of pilots who had been watching from the other side of the hangar, men and women in crisp uniforms who had seen a homeless teenager spend his afternoon helping a stranger, asking for nothing in return. Sarah handed Marcus a wrapped sandwich and a bottle of water near the employee break area. "There's more where that came from if you need it," she said, her voice gentle but not pitying. Marcus appreciated that. Too many people looked at him like he was a wounded animal. "I don't usually—" he started, then stopped. There was no point in pretending he wasn't hungry. "Thank you. What's your name?" Sarah asked, settling into a plastic chair beside him. "Marcus." He unwrapped the sandwich, turkey and Swiss on wheat bread, better than anything he'd eaten in weeks. "You don't have to sit with me. People will talk." Sarah laughed, surprising him. "Honey, I've been working airlines for 15 years. I've seen every type of person there is. Trust me, you're far from the worst company I've kept." As Marcus ate, Sarah asked gentle questions. Where was he from? How long had he been at the airport? Did he have family? Marcus found himself answering honestly, maybe because she didn't judge, or maybe because he was so tired of carrying everything alone. He told her about his mother's overdose 2 years ago, about the foster homes that never worked out, about aging out of the system at 18 with nowhere to go. He explained how the airport became his refuge, warm, relatively safe, with bathrooms and water fountains and security that mostly left him alone as long as he didn't cause trouble. "I had a job for a while," Marcus said, staring at his hands. stocking shelves at a grocery store. But when they found out I didn't have an address, they let me go. Said it was liability issues, but I know what it really was. Sarah listened without offering empty platitudes or quick fixes. When Marcus finished eating, she stood up. I have to get back to work, but Marcus, you helped me today when you didn't have to. That says something about who you are. After she left, Marcus returned to his usual spot near Gate 23, a corner where he could see the security checkpoint, but stay out of the main traffic flow. He'd learned to read the rhythms of the airport, knew which shifts were sympathetic, and which ones would hassle him. Evening was usually safe. The day shift guards knew him, and the overnight crew didn't start until midnight. He was dozing against his backpack when he heard voices approaching. Marcus tensed, ready to move if it was security, but instead he saw a man in a pilot's uniform walking toward him. The man was tall, maybe 50, with graying hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Excuse me," the pilot said. "Are you Marcus?" Marcus sat up straighter, suddenly alert. "Depends who's asking. I'm Captain Rodriguez with Southwest. Sarah Martinez told me what you did today, helping her with those supplies." The pilot's voice was calm, non-threatening. "Mind if I sit?" Marcus gestured to the empty space beside him, confused but curious. Captain Rodriguez settled down with the ease of someone comfortable anywhere. "Sarah said you've been living here for a while," Rodriguez continued. "That can't be easy." "I manage," Marcus replied, defensive. "I'm sure you do. But here's the thing. A few of us saw what happened today. The way you helped Sarah. No questions asked, no expectation of anything in return. In my line of work, character matters. And what you showed today, that's character." Marcus didn't know how to respond. He'd spent so long being invisible that having someone actually see him, really see him, felt overwhelming. "Look," Captain Rodriguez continued, "I know you don't know me from anyone, and this might sound crazy, but I'd like to help. Not charity. I'm talking about opportunity." "What kind of opportunity?" Marcus asked carefully. "There's a program through the airline industry. Helps young people get training in aviation maintenance, ground operations, things like that. Good jobs, stable jobs, the kind that come with health insurance and a steady paycheck." Rodriguez paused. "The kind that come with enough money to get your own place." Marcus felt something stir in his chest. Hope, maybe, though he tried to suppress it. Hope was dangerous when you had nothing. "Why?" he asked. "Why would you do that?" Rodriguez was quiet for a moment, watching passengers hurry past. 23 years ago, I was living in my car, trying to finish flight school. A pilot I'd never met before paid for my last semester when I couldn't afford it. Said the only payback he wanted was for me to help someone else when I could. And you think I'm worth helping? Marcus, I've seen grown men refuse to help a colleague carry a heavy bag 20 feet if there wasn't something in it for them. You spent your afternoon helping a stranger move supplies across a runway in 90-degree heat, and when she offered you food, you were embarrassed to take it. Rodriguez stood up. "Yeah, I think you're worth helping." Marcus stared at the pilot, hardly daring to believe what he was hearing. "What would I have to do?" "Show up, work hard, stay clean, no drugs, no alcohol, no criminal activity. Complete the training program. It's 6 months, and there's a small stipend while you're learning." Rodriguez reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. "Think about it. If you're interested, call this number tomorrow. Ask for Janet in Human Resources and tell her Captain Rodriguez referred you." After the pilot left, Marcus sat holding the card, turning it over in his hands. The airport continued its evening rhythm around him. Passengers dragging luggage, announcements echoing overhead, the distant roar of engines. But for the first time in years, Marcus wasn't just surviving the night. He was imagining a future. He thought about Sarah's kindness, about Captain Rodriguez's unexpected offer, about the possibility that maybe, just maybe, his luck was finally changing. The card felt impossibly light in his hands, but it carried the weight of everything he'd ever wanted. Stability, purpose, a chance to build something real. As the evening deepened and the terminal grew quieter, Marcus made a decision. Tomorrow, he would make that phone call. Tonight, for the first time in months, he would sleep believing that morning might bring something better than just another day of survival. Marcus woke before dawn on the metal bench where he'd spent the night, Captain Rodriguez's business card still clutched in his hand. The airport was eerily quiet in those early morning hours, with only the distant hum of maintenance crews and the occasional announcement echoing through the empty terminals. He'd barely slept, his mind racing with possibilities and doubts in equal measure. By 7:30, Marcus stood outside the terminal with the payphone receiver pressed to his ear, his heart hammering as the line rang. When Captain Rodriguez's voice answered, warm and professional, Marcus almost hung up. "Captain Rodriguez, this is Marcus, the kid from yesterday. You said to call about the job." "Marcus, I was hoping you would. Listen, can you meet me at the training center in an hour? It's Building C, just past the main cargo area. Ask security for directions. I'll leave your name at the gate." An hour later, Marcus found himself walking through the pristine hallways of the airline's training facility, still wearing the same worn clothes, but with his shoulders a little straighter. Captain Rodriguez met him in the lobby, dressed in civilian clothes, but carrying himself with the same quiet authority Marcus had noticed the day before. "Come on," Rodriguez said, leading him down a corridor lined with photographs of aircraft and award plaques. "I want you to meet someone." They entered an office where a woman in her 50s sat behind a desk covered with training manuals and computer printouts. She looked up as they entered, her eyes taking in Marcus's appearance without judgment. "This is Linda Chen, our training coordinator," Rodriguez explained. "Linda, this is Marcus, the young man I told you about." Linda stood and extended her hand. "Captain Rodriguez told me what you did yesterday, how you helped without being asked, how you handled yourself with professionalism despite your circumstances." Marcus shook her hand, uncertain what to say. She needed help." "Exactly," Linda smiled. "That's what we're looking for. Marcus, what we're offering isn't charity. We have an entry-level position in our ground operations department. It starts with basic training, aircraft safety, cargo handling, equipment maintenance. If you prove yourself, there are advancement opportunities, technical certifications, even pilot training programs for exceptional candidates." Marcus felt his throat tighten. I don't have an address. Or clean clothes for an interview, or..." "We've thought about that," Rodriguez interrupted gently. "There's a small apartment complex near the airport that houses some of our newer employees. Basic, but clean and safe. The company has an arrangement with them for temporary housing while people get on their feet." Linda pulled out a folder. "The job starts at $16 an hour, with full benefits after 90 days. Health insurance, dental, and access to our employee assistance programs. There's also tuition reimbursement if you want to pursue your GED or technical certifications." Marcus stared at the papers she handed him, the words blurring slightly. A real job, benefits, housing, the possibility of a future that extended beyond finding his next meal. "There's one condition," Rodriguez said, his tone serious. "This opportunity came about because 20 pilots witnessed your character yesterday. They pooled together to create this position, to fund the initial training costs. They're investing in you, Marcus, because they believe in the person they saw. Don't let them down." The weight of that responsibility settled on Marcus's shoulders, but instead of crushing him, it felt like an anchor, something solid to hold on to. 20 pilots, people he'd never met, had seen something in him worth investing in. "I won't," Marcus said, his voice steady. "When do I start?" Linda smiled. "How about right now? Let's get you set up with temporary housing, a uniform, and your first training materials. You'll start classes Monday morning." As they walked through the training center, Rodriguez explaining the different departments and career paths available, Marcus caught sight of himself in a glass door reflection. For the first time in months, he didn't see a homeless kid scraping by. He saw someone with a purpose, someone with a chance. The afternoon was spent filling out paperwork, getting measured for uniforms, and receiving a crash course in basic airport operations. When Linda handed him the keys to a small studio apartment and a week's advance on his salary, Marcus had to excuse himself to the restroom to compose himself. Standing in front of the mirror, he splashed cold water on his face and looked at his reflection again. Tomorrow, he would put on a uniform with the airline's logo. He would have a locker with his name on it, a schedule to follow, colleagues who knew him as Marcus the employee, not Marcus the homeless kid. But as he prepared to leave the training center, Marcus knew the most important part of this day wasn't the job or the apartment or even the promise of a future. It was the knowledge that kindness, the simple act of helping someone carry supplies, had created ripples he never could have imagined. Sarah had needed help, and he had given it freely. In return, the universe had given him 20 strangers who believed in him enough to change his life. 3 months later, Marcus stood in the same terminal where he had once slept on cold benches, but everything had changed. He wore the navy blue uniform of the airline training center, a clipboard in his hand, as he guided a group of new recruits through their orientation tour. The most important thing to remember, he told them as they walked past Gate 12, is that aviation isn't just about planes and procedures. It's about people taking care of people. His voice carried a confidence that would have been unimaginable just months ago. The scared, hungry teenager was gone, replaced by a young man who had found his purpose. He had excelled in every aspect of his training: aircraft maintenance, safety protocols, ground operations. But more than that, he had become the person other new employees came to when they needed guidance or encouragement. Captain Rodriguez had been right about Marcus having potential. What he hadn't expected was how naturally Marcus would become a mentor to others struggling to find their place in the world. As the orientation group moved toward the maintenance hangars, Marcus spotted a familiar figure near the boarding gates. Sarah was pulling her flight bag behind her, heading toward what looked like another international departure. Their eyes met across the busy terminal, and she smiled with genuine warmth. Marcus excused himself from the group for a moment and walked over to her. "Look at you," Sarah said, her eyes bright with pride. "Captain Rodriguez told me you've become one of their star employees." "I owe it all to that day you needed help with those supplies," Marcus said. "You could have just struggled with them yourself, but you let a stranger help you." Sarah shook her head. "You were the one who chose to help. You were hungry, exhausted, had every reason to just walk away, but you didn't. That says everything about who you are." "Where are you flying today?" Marcus asked. "São Paulo. Long flight ahead." She paused, studying his face. "You know, I've been thinking about that day too. I was having the worst week of my life. My father had just been diagnosed with cancer, I was behind on rent, and I was questioning everything about my career. When you helped me with those supplies without asking for anything in return, you reminded me why I love this job. Sometimes we all need to remember that kindness exists." Marcus felt a tightness in his throat. He had never known that Sarah was struggling too that day. "Your father, how is he?" Marcus asked. "In remission now, thank goodness, and things turned around for me too, just like they did for you." She glanced at her watch. "I should go, but Marcus, keep doing what you're doing. Keep being the person who helps carry the load." As Sarah walked toward her gate, Marcus returned to his orientation group. But something had shifted in his understanding of that day 3 months ago. It hadn't been a random act of kindness from him to her. It had been two people, both struggling, both finding exactly what they needed in each other. Later that evening, as Marcus finished his shift, he walked past the area where he used to sleep. A young woman, maybe 17, was sitting on one of the benches with a worn backpack beside her. She looked exhausted, lost, and achingly familiar. Marcus approached slowly, the way Captain Rodriguez had approached him months ago. "Excuse me," he said gently. "Are you waiting for a flight?" The girl looked up with wary eyes. "No, I'm just resting." Marcus nodded, recognizing the careful language of someone who had nowhere else to go. "I work here," he said, showing his badge. "There's a 24-hour cafe in Terminal B that's always looking for help cleaning tables in exchange for meals. And there's a family shelter about 10 minutes from here that has beds available. Would you like me to make some calls?" The girl's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. As Marcus pulled out his phone to contact the shelter coordinator he had built a relationship with, he thought about the chain of kindness that had brought him to this moment. Sarah helping him see his own worth, 20 pilots believing in a stranger, Captain Rodriguez offering not just a job, but a future. And now he was in a position to extend that same lifeline to someone else. An hour later, as Marcus watched the girl walk toward the shelter van he had arranged, he understood that the real transformation hadn't been getting off the streets or finding a job. It had been learning that kindness was never a one-way transaction. Every act of compassion created ripples that spread far beyond what anyone could see. He looked up at the departure board, watching flights prepare to carry people to destinations around the world. Tomorrow, he would be back here, training new employees, maintaining aircraft, and keeping travelers safe. But tonight, he carried with him the profound truth that Sarah had helped him discover. Sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is help someone else carry their load. In a world that often felt broken, kindness was still the thread that could weave it back together, one person at a time. What would you have done in Marcus's place? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more heartfelt stories that stay with you.